Okay, welcome back to the Espresso Insiders Podcast. Today I'm joined by Julian and Marco from Windmill Street Coffee in London. Welcome on the podcast, guys. Great to have you with me.
Thank you.
I think what we'll do to start off with is just give a very, very brief introduction to yourselves, Windmill Street Coffee as a company, and both your backgrounds in the industry.
I'm Marco Olmi. I'm the managing director of Drury Tea and Coffee, which is Windmill Street Coffee's parent company. So Windmill Street Coffee is our specialty stroke artisan brand. We set up a good few years ago now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But we've recently reinvigorated it and put a bit of a push behind it. And we brought Julian on board this summer as our resident coffee expert, head of coffee and head of training. And with part of his remit is really to head up the Windmill brand and make sure that can be as good as it can be. My background is I've been with the company for 36 years. Which is a lifetime and a half. But ours is a family business. It was started by my grandfather in 1936. So we're 88 years old this year. So my father and his brother and cousin also came into the business, and then I did, inevitably. And my eldest son is following in my footsteps as well. So we're on to our 4th generation. Drury Tea and Coffee is a sort of a bit of a dinosaur and a beast, and not as easy to navigate around the intricacies of the specialty coffee market. And so we wanted something a little bit more nimble and something we could have some fun with. And so Windmill Street Coffee was born. So that's the story behind that. And as I said, Julian's been brought on to really head up the project now. So hand over to him. He can tell you about himself.
My name is Julian. I am originally from Bolivia, from South America. I lived in different places, like in Spain for a long time, in Dubai as well. And I started in coffee in Dubai in 2014. And I've been working, I started as a barista, as everyone does in the coffee industry, mostly, right?
Unless it's a family business and
yes, exactly. And now I am the head of training and quality here at Drury and Windmill. And I mostly focus my time on trainings. We run a lot of SCA trainings here at Drury. And I am also a Q Arabica instructor.
Right. Okay.
And I'm really happy to be here. I never worked in a company because I always worked in smaller coffee businesses. And I'm really, I was surprised when I saw Drury the first time with this massive machine they have. And I'm really happy to be part of that now.
Yeah, two very different sort of entry points and routes into the coffee industry. But obviously, like you say, I think that the interesting thing there, and we'll go into it in a little bit more detail in a minute, from both of your perspectives, is how you've had this kind of mammoth brand of Drury Coffee, and now you've kind of launched a smaller, more nimble, fresh kind of sub-brand, if you like, that sits underneath it in Windmill Street itself. What would be great to get into now, guys, if you don't mind, is just a little bit of the history and the origin story behind Drury Tea and Coffee, and then obviously how you kind of touched on how you started with Windmill Street, but kind of where you see it going.
Our company was started in 1936, as I said, by my grandfather and his 2 brothers. Originally just a tea company. We were Olmi Brothers Tea, and stayed that way until 1939, when we expanded into coffee. With hindsight, not the best year to start an international dealing with an international commodity, but there you go. So we kept going during the war years, and kept, again, it was almost completely tea until the sort of late 40s, and then we sort of delved back into coffee, and started roasting in the late 40s. In 1953 or 1954, we're not sure which, we were the first UK company to roast espresso for the original Bar Italia in Soho. We mainly supplied a lot of the Italian cafes and coffee shops from the start of the espresso, the first ever espresso boom in the UK in the 1950s and 60s. And that's where our sort of strength and our base really was with those. We're an Italian family, and Anglo, definitely, completely Anglo-Italians, and many of our customers were as well. And so now I'm supplying the sort of sons and grandsons of those first entrepreneurs in the hospitality business. I mean, we've got some customers we've supplied for 50 or 60 years, so it's a long, not always glorious, but a long and sometimes glorious history. And we would, through the 80s, 90s, etc., when the restaurant scene started exploding, this is where Drury's always been involved in the London hospitality scene. But then we realized that, as things changed in the 10, 15 years ago, we needed to up our game a little bit. Our commodity grade coffee is good, but it's not specialty coffee. And that's where Windmill Street came into it. We needed a vehicle that was, we never hide the fact that it's Drury Tea and Coffee, but it is very different branding. Yeah. So we wanted something that just distinguished itself a little bit, would open maybe some more doors where people wouldn't consider Drury because of we are a little bit old-fashioned, I guess, in a good way. The Windmill Street branding was meant to appeal to a new generation of barista-led cafes springing up all over London. And but we wanted to do something a little bit different in our own way. So when we came to create the brand, we reflected on our origin. Now, we started as a company in Soho in Great Windmill Street. And that's where we got the name from. We weren't there for long. We then moved to Drury Lane, which is where Drury Tea and Coffee comes from, when we changed our name from Olmi Brothers Tea. We reflected on that beginning, and then we thought, when was our heyday? Okay, that was the 1950s and 60s. And so in terms of the branding, we deliberately looked to something that's inspired by the 1950s and 60s, in terms of our packaging and appeal, etc. And that's worked quite well. It's differentiated us from a lot of the other smaller specialty suppliers out there. So we, the remit was quite simple. Let's look at better quality coffees, specialty quality coffees, but let's make them very, very accessible. And let's back that up with the resources that Drury had to call on. So, fleet of delivery vehicles, engineering. We've had a long association with Rancilio espresso machines. We've been dealing with them since 1990. And so we have an engineering force, that's part of the company. We maintain equipment, we install equipment, and we brought all those resources to bear. We weren't, although it was a very small part of the business, we're not a 2 or 3 man company. It's bigger than that. So it gives us purchasing power, allows us to provide value for money for our clients, and all the backup services that a modern coffee company needs to bring along. We've got a great training team now that's Julian's heading up. He's got 3 trainers fully employed, in-house underneath him as his resources. And if we were a smaller startup, we might not have those sort of resources. So it works very well. And we're very, very pleased with the results. And it's now going from strength to strength. It took a long time to get started, but we appear to be there now. So it's doing very well.
Great stuff. And Marco, I think that's a really, really interesting summary of kind of the journey of Drury Tea and Coffee and Windmill Street as well, where you've got the backing and the resource of a larger company with a lot of heritage, a lot of prestige, and a lot of history in the coffee industry, not just from a resource perspective, but I think also from a expertise point of view. You've been in business for a long, long time. A startup that you see a lot of startups, particularly white label based brands, where they're essentially outsourcing their roasting, and they're kind of just they're a brand. They're not necessarily a prestigious, with heritage, long-term company that has got the kind of expertise and the history that yourselves have. And I think obviously you want to separate Windmill Street from Drury Tea and Coffee, but given that it's a separate company, separate entity, but with a bit of that familiarity and using the resource, like you say, from a infrastructure point of view, where you've got, you know, your fleet of vehicles, like you say, your roasting facilities, your production facilities, etc. But also you've got that fresh new vibe with the company. So no, it's really interesting, and an interesting business model as well. Something that, you know, you would have thought more big companies might go after. So quite an innovative way of doing it, I would have thought. That's right. Yeah. So moving on to the present day then, Julian, from your point of view, obviously I've looked at kind of the website and looked at some of the coffee you have to offer. I've tried some myself in the past. I think one thing that I find really interesting for both smaller startup companies, but all, you know, how it's a challenge, and maybe for longer term, well-established companies, it's something that's a point of success. When you're looking at your kind of house blends, your seasonal blends, and obviously your sugarcane decaf you've got, looking at producing those coffees, how do you kind of maintain some of those long-lasting relationships with producers and farms across a variety of different kind of continents and single origins and what have you? Like, how do you pick out some of those really high quality producers to, you know, produce such a wide variety of different coffee?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We normally, like, if from a commodity point of view, the most important thing is like being consistent, right? So we always we try to work with the same producers and like keep the flavor consistent. With Windmill, we have a bit more of a wiggle point. We can play around a little bit more, especially with the seasonal blend. So we can be a bit more brave and, I don't know, fruit forward, right? Yeah. So that gives us a bit of like, I don't know, freedom to work with different producers, with different approaches to processing coffee, to marketing green coffee. We mostly work with one green importer that is helping us a lot with certifications, with the information that comes from the farmers. And of course, we try to balance the flavor at the end of the product with the story of the farmers, right? We have been working with a project from Sucafina called Impact.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Where there is like a direct impact on the relationships with the producers. So it's a combination of responsibility as a roaster and the final flavor, we could say, right? So we can like focus a bit more on fruitiness and acidity, and that means getting coffees that have been produced more carefully, right? And by farmers that have a lot of experience, and that are putting a lot of effort in the production, right? So we try to give them a voice as well, and to showcase those coffees, because if you see in the website, we have coffees that are quite interesting and very not common, right? Like the Costa Rica or the Colombian Arabic we have, they are like flavor wise very, I don't know, like forward thinking, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting because obviously those are two kind of well-known and large coffee producing companies, but it's interesting that you've obviously built up those relationships from the Drury Tea and Coffee side of things, and you can then pick and choose a little bit more and be a bit more selective.
Yeah, exactly.
Micro lots, the single origins you go for, etc. And you know, you can take a bit more risk almost because you've already got that track record from the Drury side of things.
And excuse me, sorry, like the risk is that's a good point, because like the quantities that Drury moves are massive, right? But Windmill has a smaller output of coffee, so we can, like you said, like taking a bit more risks with coffees that maybe someone likes or maybe other customers don't like. Yeah. So we can always change, right? It's not about, of course, it's about being consistent and having quality and as a standard, of course, high quality as a standard, but we can play around a little bit more. So that is like that is the fun part that we don't.
Like you say, you've got that kind of the C grade where I suppose the bigger market for that from Drury Tea and Coffee, but then you can be a little bit more creative with coffees you're picking and choosing. And obviously, you mentioned there, Julian, about the story behind some of the smaller lot producers that you're kind of working with. So just touching on that, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, and a lot of people kind of band around, the story behind the bean and what have you. And I think it's something that is a selling point of new coffees, as well as the flavor, but it sometimes can be a little bit smoke and mirrors. Kind of, what is the story? How do you select, and how do you know that you're going to be building a long-lasting relationship with particularly a smaller production facility or a smaller farmer, even if it is in a well-established country or coffee producing country? So on that point, how do you know, or how do you assess, or what's the criteria you use to pick a new producer, particularly, for example, with your seasonal blends?
Well, if I can just step in very briefly there, I think we are flavor led first. Sure. And that's really important. So stories, and the producers are critical to this, obviously, but it's got to be flavor led, or it's not going to be sustainable with a small s going forward, because we won't sell it, and therefore we won't be buying the coffee. Well, and that's really important. You can't just have a story. And you're right. Smoke and mirrors. A lot of it's bandied around. But so Julian will select when we're coming to blend a new. Well, we're going to be introducing a new version of the house blend fairly shortly. So we've just gone through this exercise, and so Julian will have several potential coffees, which we'll all cup. And I'm learning so much. I mean, I've been 36 years, but I'm learning so much from this man. It's fantastic. We are. So we will taste these coffees, and then but then we'll look at several things. Price is important. Of course it is. We need to make sure this is accessible. We could get some fantastic coffees, but if we start trying to sell them for 40 or 50 pounds a kilo, it's not going to work. We're not going to sell them, certainly to the hospitality market. So we need to look at that, but then we also look at who the producer is. Are they, this new initiative from Sucafina Impact is fantastic. It's easy to make an impact. Excuse the pun, but it is exactly. It does what it says on the tin. You pay a premium that goes directly into the producers, making sure that they are, providing everything they need to for their workers. And it's great. It's really easy. And I would urge anybody to look at Sucafina's website and see what they're doing, because it's flying under the radar a little bit. It's a new scheme. I've heard of it
before, to be honest with you. I think obviously we can put the link in the show notes, and people can have a look for themselves after listening to the podcast. But yeah, I mean, feel free to talk a bit more about that. I mean, it's not something I'd come across before, but it sounds like you hear about, I mean, I've got a financial background. You hear about impact investing a lot, and obviously people wanting to make an impact, and that's kind of piggybacking off of the fair trade movement and what have you. But it's making sure that the profits do go to the farmers themselves. So I mean, how did you come across the initiative, and how does it work?
Well, we've been dealing with Sucafina are our main green coffee supplier. And we've been dealing with them in one guise or another for something like 70 plus years. So they were a company called Complete Coffee, who then became part of the Sucafina group a few years ago. So they've introduced this as a new initiative from them. It does what Fair Trade and the Rainforest Alliance does. I mean, we support both of those, particularly Rainforest Alliance. But on the Drury side, we over 50% of what we sell from Drury is Rainforest Alliance certified. Okay. And they're great schemes. The impact scheme is also very, very good. And as I say, from a producer's point of view, it's nice and easy. So, what we don't want is, although Drury is a larger company, we're not some big multinational. We don't have the resources to start running 5, 6, 7 different certification programs, and all the audits and things that go with that. Impact's good because it doesn't come with any of that sort of stuff. It is just literally that money gets pushed into the farms. Make sure that farmers are being rewarded for growing good coffee and looking after their workers and providing, everything, decent housing, medical facilities, clean water, etc., on the farms. And also looking at the environmental aspects of it. A good coffee farm will be sustainable in every way, in terms of shade trees and biodiversity, etc. All very, very, very important. It was really a no-brainer. There's a lot of really good coffees that are coming through that are impact certified, and so that's how we start looking at these stories. There's a lot of the impact coffees are also women-only farms, or led by women, not women. That sounds too prescriptive, but led by women in typically a very male-dominated industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so we'll look at things like that. So yeah, it's just a case of, as Julian was saying, we look at all these factors. So taste first of all, is it going to be commercially viable? And let's look at what good is being done on the ground, and then that brings the whole package together, and we create the blends.
Yeah, and recently Sucafina released like a gender equality report, and it's quite interesting. They gathered a lot of information about the farms they work with, and they came up with a plan on how to improve things in the future. And for example, now we are going to buy for the seasonal blend coffee from Burundi, grown by a farm owned by women. And when you buy coffee from them, you are of course trying to help to use the word help is not nice. So it's more because sometimes people in the industry buying coffee, it looks like we are doing charity. It's not that. It's that we are doing a commercial transaction. They are coffee professionals. They sell us coffee, right? Yeah. But buying from them means that number one, we are promoting their farm. Number two, we are acknowledging they are doing a good job because the coffee tastes amazing. And number three is that putting some money in, like Marco said, in projects led by women in an industry mostly run by men is quite refreshing, right?
Absolutely. No, it's really interesting, and I think it touched on a number of different topics. I think, Burundi, you've got that kind of traditionally complex, sort of juicy and berry flavor notes that come out of those coffees from there, and probably to the man on the street, probably a lesser known coffee producing in Africa. I think what's interesting there, you touched upon sort of you're driven and led by, obviously, first and foremost, taste and flavor. Price, you're a business. It has to make commercial sense. That goes without saying. And I think, that's something that shouldn't be shied away from in these sort of conversations. The impact and the sort of social and environmental side of things from a sustainability point of view is heavily promoted, to the point where I think, it's across not just the coffee industry, but a number of different industries. Greenwashing is becoming rife. A lot of people are basically saying, buy this coffee because it's from for example, predominantly women produced farm, or it's sustainable and what have you. But until you dive into what that actually means, and if the coffee taste and flavor doesn't stack up, then that's all well and good. But it's not that, from a commercial point of view, that isn't sustainable, because people aren't going to keep on buying it. Simple as that. If the taste isn't there, people aren't going to keep on buying it. So I think, moving kind of on from that, but along the same lines, is from a quality point of view. Obviously, you've got kind of the C grade stuff, and then the more speciality coffee that Windmill Street kind of focuses on more. How do you focus and maintain that quality that you've mentioned? So you mentioned you do the cuppings, you've got trainers in house, but when you're looking at sort of coffee quality and consistency, what are the main things you're looking for across the different blends that you produce in the brand? Julie, maybe more one for you to start off with.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think quality is something should be something holistic, right? From the beginning to the end product, right? So normally, again, we try to take moisture measurements of the coffee first to see how stable they are, right? We sample roast our samples. We cap them. We use an app called Tastify to record all the flavors. So we have like a library of what we might work with, right?
Data driven, then, really.
Oh yeah. I think quality should be data driven, right? Because if not, it's just an opinion, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think sometimes I've always had it in my head that you have a maestro master cupping taster, and it's kind of like this one.
No.
Which is obviously the case. Like this is the ethereal coffee that we're going to go with, and it's kind of a feeling and a bit of a more of an art than a science. But
no, I think the most important thing is to know what customers want, right? Because again, quality is a conception of quality. So maybe what I like as coffee, other people won't, right? So we need to think about what our customers like. That's the first thing. And then once we have all that data, we can start blending, tasting the coffees. We always taste everything. That is I think is the way of working that works best, right? And then of course we sell a lot of wholesale, right? So sometimes shops, they don't have the experience to serve the coffee as it should be. So that's the reason we have a set of trainers. They are very experienced, and they can either go to the shops or bring people in here. So we can keep the flavor the same. And we also work with water filters, because normally we supply, or we help supplying water filters, right?
Yeah.
Well, as you know, water has a big impact on the flavor of the coffee at the end, right? So it's like there are a lot of steps to have at the end a cup of coffee that tastes as it should be, right? And that is like something that you decide from the moment you buy the green coffee until you roast it, and until you serve it at the end in a cafe, right?
No, it's a really, really interesting point, because I think what's good there is that you're deciding and setting a standard for your own coffee that you're producing through the cupping and the blending, etc. You have your end product, and then you're almost helping to facilitate that flavor being translated, to the customer via your training that you provide, and the engineering side of things as well. Just from training baristas, but also, like you say, you've got kind of the engineering side of things and offering water filters, etc. So you're kind of allowing other cafes to maintain the quality of your own coffee, kind of from, well, bean to cup is very much it literally is in this case, bean to cup, outside of your own cafes as well. So just touching on that as well, for question for both of you around sort of the training and engineering side of things, I think it's something that's growing in the industry, and you're seeing more and more, barista training and barista training programs and offerings, but more around kind of latte art and customer service and those sorts of things, less around sort of taste and preparation. So I think what's interesting there is, when you offer your training, kind of what do you offer from a training point of view? And it sounds like it's more kind of quality focus and clean cup focus, rather than latte art and presentation side of things, which you see a lot popping up these days.
Yeah, we offer mainly three things. That is like a basic barista training for people that are starting to work in a cafe. We have an advanced one. And then for people that are already professionals, we offer SCA courses, right? Specialty Coffee Association courses. But they are more designed for people that want to get the certification, right? We focus on setting up the grinder. we have certain parameters to follow, time, and depending on the basket size, how much coffee we will use in the baskets. We try to talk about flavor, like a balance between acidity and bitterness in espresso. And then, of course, we focus on milk steaming because, as you know, like the UK is a big consumer of milk-based drinks, right?
Everyone loves
it. Yeah, and people still love latte art. So we also focus a bit on that. Because at the end, you need to be able to to know how to calibrate your grinder, how to serve a nice espresso, but also how to serve a proper flat white, right?
Yeah.
People, some students are really keen to try things, like to try coffees. Some other students don't like coffee at all, but we try to encourage them to drink. So I mean, the idea is the same as being a chef, right? So if you want to be a barista, you need to start drinking coffee, and flavor is a big part of it, right? You cannot be a chef and don't like food, right?
Taste. You're absolutely right. And so I think that's interesting from the training side of things. I mean, the other thing that I found really interesting reading up on the brand is sort of the engineering side of the business. Yeah. And because that's something that I don't come across very often. I mean, like I say, you do come across some brands offering barista training and, like I said, more on the kind of presentation side of things than the sort of taste and quality. But from an engineering point of view, kind of what services do you offer, and how did that come about as well? Is that more kind of for commercial, obviously, brands?
Very much so. I mean, we've been involved with espresso equipment since the late 1980s, and shortly after I started my career. And we actually used to have a separate service company, which has been since amalgamated into Drury Tea and Coffee. And for many years, they were the sole UK importer of Rancilio equipment. That's no longer the case now as we sort of scaled that side of things down a bit, but it's all about the service. So we employ in-house engineers. So we have a proper structure. We have a head of operations who works alongside a service manager. They sort of dovetail together with the engineering. And then we have workshop engineers who refurbish machines, prepare machines, etc. Do full workshop services on customers' machines. And then we have mobile engineers as well, operating 6 days a week across London. So it is a complete service. So if you're a cafe buying Windmill Street Coffee, you can get the equipment from us. It's not compulsory at all, but if you want to get the equipment from us, you can do so. You can buy a coffee machine. We will install it, and we will look after it. And then it goes hand in hand with the training. We teach you how to use it properly as well. So, I mean, for instance, we had an installation yesterday. It wasn't actually for Windmill Street Coffee. It was a Drury coffee customer. But we attended site. It's a new cafe that's opening up. So the personnel, an engineer went along there with the equipment to install it. A barista trainer went there to go and set up the grinder, commission the machine, get the levels exactly right, make sure that coffee's tasting perfect, and start teaching the staff on site how to use it. They'll also come in before they open, they'll come in for in-depth training on site here. And then the salesperson whose customer it was there as well, running interference and overseeing the whole thing. So we send, there's 3 people attend. In this case, actually, it was our sales director. It's one of his customers, and so he went along. So they're the big gun there, and but it's a complete service, complete package, and then we maintain that equipment. So if something's not right, so if the coffee, we get a call from somebody who's buying Windmill Street Coffee, and there's something not quite right with the coffee, we can send an engineer, we can send a trainer. One of those two is going to solve that problem. Maybe the grind's slightly off and it needs adjusting. Maybe there's a slight issue with the pressure on the machine that might need adjusting. That's where, the trainers have some engineering knowledge as well, so they can diagnose and fix small problems. But if it's a circuit board that's gone down that needs replacing, then the engineering team come in, fix that. And from a customer's point of view, it's reassuring because they've got one company to shout at and to solve the problem. We prefer if they don't shout. We prefer if they ask politely. But we do, we've got fantastic response times. We're handling service calls across London all the time. Very often it's a same day full fix most of the time, unless a call comes in at 4:45, then sometimes that goes on to the next day. It works, and it has worked for decades. And we're just applying that Drury formula to Windmill Street Coffee. That total solution for people, for customers. So
fantastic. No, it sounds like a very much a one-stop shop, end-to-end full package. And like you say, it sounds like a customer can kind of pick and choose the services they want from that, but you do offer a full suite. So if someone wants to, go from start to finish, from buying the coffee, grinders, machines, dialing in, etc., from start to finish, you offer that. And I think that's a really, it speaks to the customer care side of things as well, is that you understand you're not just offering just a Rancillo machine wholesaler and it's kind of off you go and dial in. It's kind of like you offer the full support, not just in the engineering and the technical setup side of things, but then obviously, like you say, from a sort of taste and quality and maintaining that side as well. So, those brands can actually offer the coffee that you want to deliver, essentially. So no, very interesting. I don't know if there's any other kind of major topics you wanted to sort of discuss other than kind of plans for 2025 and what kind of is exciting coming up, both maybe starting with Windmill Street, but obviously from a Drury side as well, for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think growth is important. I think next year has been widely publicised, could be a very challenging year for the hospitality industry, due to certain political decisions that have been made, whether they be right or wrong, and it's certainly going to have an impact. And so therefore, I think we need to be resilient first. We need to make sure we're supporting our customers as much as we can, so that they can deliver the best tasting coffee. So they've got that competitive edge in a high street that's full of so many chains. This is where the independents can score, and this is why we have to support them to make the best possible product they can, whether that's via the Windmill brand or the Drury brand, doesn't really matter. Let's just make sure we help them to help themselves and survive whatever comes. Saying that, who knows? I think that there's still plenty of growth in the industry, and I really would like to see more independents doing better. I mean, they are generally they're taking the fight to the big chains, and without doubts they provide a better product. So I'd like to see more of that, and I think now Julian sort of knows what we're about. He's sort of got our company culture after working with us since the summer. It'd be up to him to express himself through the Windmill brand, and bring his vast experience and knowledge to the brand to just keep on increasing the quality and increasing the appeal. And then I think I'd quite like to have a real push on the retail side of things as well. We're not selling enough Windmill Street to the general public. We've got a mail order site. The Drury one does really, really well, and we've had a retail presence since we started. Originally, obviously, with shops, which we no longer have physical shops. But I'd like Windmill to sort of push along with that, and that's probably maybe offering a broader sort of range of coffees and things like that. I think getting a few nice, exciting things in that maybe wouldn't appeal to the hospitality businesses, but would appeal to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And Julian, now you've got your feet under the table at Windmill Street, kind of for yourself, what are your kind of key focuses for next year?
I think it will be interesting to focus on training a bit more as well, like on the SCA side of things, because we started to offer SCA courses. We offer barista, introduction, green coffee, roasting, and something else that I forgot. But sensory skills.
Oh, sensory training as well.
Yeah, and then we will start offering the CVA courses. You know, the new cupping protocols by the SCA for the coffee value assessment from the SCA. So I think it would be good to focus on that type of training as well. We will offer other types of trainings for home users as well, not only for people that work in coffee, but for people that maybe have a machine at home, or they just like to make coffee as a evening event, right? And regarding the coffees we will get for Windmill, I think, it's quite exciting because we have that freedom to focus either on flavor or either in story, and get the product out that is fulfilling for everyone, for the customers, for us. And also one good thing that is happening here is that the specialty world can learn a lot from the commodity world, especially regarding procedures, how effective you are. And that is something that I'm learning here, because the roastery works really well with not so many people, right? So in the sense that it's so well organized, and there's so much machinery and stuff that helps with the final product. That is something that we can bring to the specialty section as well, right? To be effective, consistent, and focus on the product.
Yeah, no, amazing. I think focusing on the processes so the people can do their thing is clearly a big part of it that, like you say, specialty can learn from. And so it is a little bit more kind of easy to maintain that consistency. One last question that I try to ask everyone that's been on the podcast so far is, how do you take your coffee? Because everyone we're called Espresso Insiders, which means that, everyone says they love espresso, but I also like filter coffee. I also like, basic French press. And I think you've touched on there kind of trying to educate home users. That's kind of my remit, and I'm not a coffee professional. I'm an enthusiast, and I think sometimes bringing it back down to earth and saying, look, we love espresso, but maybe filter's good, maybe this and that's good. So do you guys individually have a preference of how you take your morning coffee? And
I only take it with a lot of sugar and a lot of milk.
Whipped cream on top as well.
With cream on top.
Sprinkles. No, I like. I like. The good thing about coffee is that it's very versatile, right? So I like a good filter. I love a French press because it reminds me of the flavors you get when you are cupping coffee, right? It's like a similar brewing.
Heavier mouthfeel and a bit more.
The mouthfeel, yeah. And then, but I also enjoy a good flat white. So I think coffee has such a different ways of expressing itself that you can enjoy. There is no right or wrong way of drinking coffee, right? But probably my favorite way of drinking is filter.
I think for me it's more about the necessity. So we start early here. I get in. I'm normally the first in. I open up at about 20:06, and so I put a pot of filter coffee on. And there's four of us that open up the office from about 6:30 onwards, and we just demolish that pot of coffee because you have to. And then after that, I'm spoiled rotten at 8:00 when the training team come in. They bring me a beautiful flat white directly to my desk, which is lovely. And then I try and that's it. If Julian's brewing something up in the afternoon, I might have a little cup, but nothing too much. I tend to drink tea actually for the rest of the day.
Yeah, well, you've got both. I've got both
of those. So I have a nice cup of breakfast tea. But I've always finished the evening off with a little small ristretto at the end of the day after my dinner, and to help.
Not a nice Italian cappuccino.
Absolutely. So So there we go.
Fantastic, and it's been a fantastic time to speak to you guys, and really enjoyed listening to some history of the brand, the fact that you've got kind of this larger Goliath parent brand in in Drury, but also then this kind of more dynamic and fresh, smaller brand in Windmill Street. So wish you all success for 2025. Sounds like a fantastic load of
the same.
And yeah, I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you again. Guys, where can we reach you on social media if people want to get involved and obviously thinking more in terms of end users and home baristas rather than retail? Where can they buy coffee? Where can they find you? How can they find out more about the brand?
Just search Windmill Street Coffee, Instagram, Facebook, website, windmillstreetcoffee.co.uk. I think I don't handle that side of things, but we're on there. There's only one. They'll find us.
Great stuff. Any last words, guys, before we close off? Anything else?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to put our
thank you very
story
much.
across. It's been great.